one question that we always like to start with, because I feel like it's like the perfect place to sort of like explain your journey in football and yeah, is just where did you sort of start your career with football? Was it when you were younger? Was it when you were a little bit older? Because everybody's journey sort of starts at a different place.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because I started when I was about 8. I convinced my parents to let me start playing because my older cousin, who I just got to see for the first time in a few years the other day, um, I thought she was so cool. She was like 4 or 5 years older than me. She played. Um, and yeah, I just thought she was the coolest thing, so I wanted to do what she did. And my sister just swam. And I already swam too, so that wasn't as fun for me. Um, it was the start of me playing a lot of different sports growing up, but I got into it because of her. And it's different in the States. I was part of like a rec team first, and then you have different like club teams, and I kind of joined the rec team, and then they were like, "You're too good for this. Join the next team." So I joined the next team, and then that kind of wasn't the right fit, so I joined a different team, and yeah, kind of just grew from there. But it was all because of my cousin, and it was really cool. I got to see her and her family for the first time um, in years. And I'm not sure she knows that that's why I really wanted to play, but she's the one that started it all.
Yeah, and I know like obviously you obviously play as a goalkeeper now, but did you start sort of out as a goalkeeper? I know there's loads of different stories of players who sort of like I know like Hannah Hampton started outfield and then got put in goal and then just sort of stayed there. Is that the same for you, or did you always know from the start that that was sort of the position you wanted to play?
Yeah, no, me and Hannah have a similar story, I guess. I definitely was an outfielder, kind of played everywhere. You know, when you're a kid, you kind of do it all. But because I played all different sports, I thought being a goalkeeper was fun, for like a small amount of time, but not actually. It was scary. But I like to do the trainings. And then when I moved clubs, I went to a team that didn't really have many goalkeepers. We had one, and she didn't really want to play anymore. We were like 12. And so I was like, okay, well, I kind of know what I'm doing. I'll jump in for one practice. And then they forced me to play in a game, and then I did all right, and they kept forcing me back there, and then I kind of grew to love it, but I was definitely not a fan at first, if I'm honest.
I want to touch on that. You did say, obviously, you're now back in the USA, which we're all very aware of, joining Tampa Bay and stuff like that. Congratulations, by the way. I do
Thank
want to
you.
ask, though, what were the main differences you kind of noticed playing football in different countries? Obviously, being with Arsenal and now with Tampa Bay, two different countries. What were those main differences?
Yeah, well, it's still early on, back home in Tampa, so it's tough to give a good insight into that. But I think just playing even when I was in Iceland and Denmark before I got to Arsenal, I think you can tell that the tactical awareness of the game is just a little bit more in depth in the US. I think we're on a shift now with Emma Hayes. We'll see how the Olympics goes, but um, the US has also been known as this athletic, right? Where it's always athletic. It's just a win at all cost mentality, very gritty.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, when I was in Denmark, they really brought a few of us Americans in for that specific reason, for that mentality, for that grit, for that athleticism, and just tried to help us with the tactics once we got there. So with Arsenal and especially under Jonas, and Aaron and Patrick and uh, all the assistant coaches. There's a lot of coaches at Arsenal. Um, and Seb, our goalkeeper coach, everything had a purpose tactically. And that wasn't always kind of the case. You're seeing it here and you see a lot of more development in the US now. There's a lot of tactical minded, but it's still kind of we do this tactics, but we do it to win. And I think that mentality is still pretty strong in the States.
Do you have like a preference of which one you prefer? I know obviously you said it is early on, but based on those experience you've had in two different sides of the world, do you have like a preference of which one you like more?
I think I definitely like a blend. I think I fell in love more with football when I went abroad and I saw how much of an impact it had culturally. It doesn't
Hmm.
have the same impact here in the States too, which is another big difference. Um, like you live and breathe it. In England and all across Europe. One of my best friends plays in Mexico, and she said it's really similar there, but in the States it's not quite the same. Like tonight I'm going to a baseball game with my family. Like I'm not a big baseball fan, but you just do that. You're around other sports or like American football is huge. We really love basketball here too. Like there's just so much else to do. It's
Mhm.
not just soccer or football. And I think I do really like the blend. I think the American mentality and the grit, and the passion that we have and that we bring to the game is special. I think it's inspiring, but I don't think it has much purpose if you don't have that tactical ability behind it. Um, and I think that's what makes, Emma Hayes going to the US so exciting for a lot of people is possibly getting more of a combination from that. But it's also why you see like the Spanish team just won the Euros. Like I just watched a tactical video on it the other day. It's really fascinating. It's really cool, and it makes the game beautiful, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's
100%.
crazy. Obviously, you're obviously Emma Hayes now being in the US, and obviously you probably had a lot of experience playing with against Emma Hayes' Chelsea, obviously with Arsenal. I wanted to touch on Arsenal as well because we'll admit in a heartbeat that we are, really big Arsenal fans. The culture is massive, you'll know, at Arsenal, like the relationship between the fans and the players, and I know you probably would have felt that all the way through. What was, no pressure to say that it was good, by the way, but what was that relationship like between players and fans at Arsenal? Was that a big part of like your time at the club? Like, what was it like when you were at Arsenal?
Yeah, I think the shift has been huge, and I came right after the Euros, and I think that was a massive shift with the fan base, just in women's football in general. I think the Arsenal fan base was there has been there for a very long time, and it's really special. Um, but I think seeing that exponential growth really quickly, I'm not sure it didn't hinder the relationship with the fans, but it definitely separated it a little bit. We've got security at the games, making sure that we don't stay too long or get too close. And mostly that has to do with just honestly how amazing the fans are and how much support there is. We used to, as women's footballers, be super, super accessible. And we're starting to get a little bit away from it. And I think a lot of that is because of, yeah, just player safety, and they're looking out for it. And it is part of the growth of the game. But I think as Arsenal players and having been so accessible for so long, the girls still feel that and they still feel connected. Um, but it is kind of a balance of, okay, well, we're not really supposed to walk around anymore. We kind of get yelled at that, but we want to say hi to the fans. Um, we want to say hi in the street, but we also want to live our own lives. I think there's a tough balance, but I think at the same time you get to look back and be like, wow, we get to reach so many people. Especially, a club like Arsenal, it's pretty special. It's really cool. I really liked it. It was a really cool experience. There's a lot different coming from like, a small team in Denmark. Um, yeah, and then just like a kid from the States. Nobody, again, it's not as big of a thing to care about, soccer here.
Yeah, I mean, also, as you mentioned, you came right after the Euros, and you also talked about the feeling in Arsenal and everything. What changed, if any, did change in just the general environment at Arsenal when multiple players did their ACL? Because we know Beth did hers and a lot of other players did their ACL. And yeah, just what changed at just in general at the situation and feeling also.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think because so many players had it kind of back to back in one club. I mean, you see it all the time now, unfortunately. But I think seeing it back to back to people that you just really care about, and especially when, Beth and Viv first did theirs, everybody knew that they were going through a lot in their personal lives. And, we were already kind of rallying around and supporting them, especially, Beth with her mom all around that time, but Viv being super close to them as well. I think it just brought us all together in a kind of a different in a different way. I think a lot of people, whether you've had an ACL injury or not, have had longer term injuries, and you just know how difficult it is, and the kind of stigma around it. So I think there was a definite shift, but it was mostly positive. I think there's obviously some, I don't know if anger is the right word, but just sadness around it as well, right? You're really emotional about it. But I also know, like, as soon as I found out that I did mine, I knew that I was around the right people to help me through it, because they had either just gone through it or continued going through it or had seen it. And that brought a lot of people together to fight for each other in that way, and also to fight to stay incorporated. When you have a long-term injury, you can feel like you're left out of the group sometimes. You miss away games and travel. You're not on the pitch with everybody at training. You're stuck inside the gym or whatever it may be. And I think because it was very prominent in the team, people worked really hard to make sure that everyone was there for each other. And that is really special. And it is a special part about that group too.
I do want to ask how important that support system was during your recovery, though, because I know that with Beth and Viv, they released obviously the step-by-step documentary, and we got to see an insight into really how it was. I know that wasn't everything. We didn't see all the lows, but we saw how it was throughout their thing. I just want to know how important your support system was during that and how important that was to your recovery.
Yeah, it's everything. Honestly, it's massive. And it's not just the girls that had done it, it's the girls that had done it years prior, or the girls that were just there every day to just to see you, see their smile on their faces. Everybody genuinely cared about each other. But I was also really, really fortunate. My mom kind of dropped everything and came over, flew over right before Thanksgiving, which I know you guys isn't a thing for you guys, but it's obviously a holiday in the States. So she dropped everything and came and took care of me for 6 weeks, alongside the girls. And Miley, the little puppy that I got to take care of a little bit as well. She kind of took care of me. But yeah, it's everything. It's really, because it's really hard situation to deal with that injury, whether you're a professional athlete or not. I think you can see there's just an actress that tore her ACL at the WNBA All-Star, so I'm sure she needs her support system too. But yeah, it's huge, especially when you're not as mobile as you're used to being and not as free. You spend a lot of time at home, and to have your people around you is, yeah, I couldn't have gotten through it the way I did without them.
Going back to, you mentioned the sadness also when you're doing your ACL. How big of a role also does mental health play in the whole recovery process? And I mean, especially after just getting injured.
Yeah, I think mental health plays a big role in our lives in general for everyone. I think for me specifically, and I've spoken to a few people within Arsenal and beyond Arsenal that I know have done their ACLs. I was kind of dealing with a tough time right before I did my ACL. And I was starting to feel like I was kind of coming out of that when I did my ACL, and then obviously kind of dropped back into a tough place, but it was different. But I also think knowing, like what we just talked about, knowing that I had that support system, I felt a bit at ease in certain ways. I knew I was going to get through it because I had them. And yeah, it made the tough times a little bit easier because I always had somebody to talk to. I always had somebody to rely on. But that only came because I put the work in before an injury. I put the work in, have those friendships in place, and credit to some of those girls there. They're just incredible people. And really great friends who also really care about mental health. I think as of right now, I've got a couple text messages that I have to get back to from specifically the people that tore their ACL before me, just checking in to see how I'm doing abroad, since I don't see them again every day. Yeah, so I think for me, I'm a big people person. And when my mental health is struggling, I need my people. Otherwise, it just gets worse.
And obviously, with you moving clubs now, do you have any goals you set for yourself? Do you have anything specific you want to achieve, or something that your club maybe will help you achieve in the future?
Yeah, I try not to worry too much about specifics. I mean, specifically as a club, we're looking to, is a new club in a new league to win the championship. Right off the bat, there's not too much going on with that league, but it's brand new and it's a great opportunity to start really strong with our group. I'm not quite there yet in my rehab to be directly involved with that yet. Definitely get there. So my specific goal is to get my knee right and to get back on the field, be able to get some minutes. But first, the focus is getting my knee right. But kind of like I just said, the most specific goal I have right now is to build my social circle here, to get to know my teammates, to get to know my coaches and the staff around us, and then rely on my family, which I get to be around now, which is huge. So specifically that building those relationships is at the forefront of my mind. And then the rest of it will kind of just keep going. But I know I need that around me. So everyone says like, oh, are you settling in? Are you settling in? Like, yeah, I am, because I'm putting those things that I know are going to make me feel settled at the forefront. And the things like playing will kind of all work itself out.
I know obviously you left Arsenal. What like weighed into your decision to move to this specific club? Was it the idea of this new club in a new league, or was it just a sense of moving back home, or was there something that made that decision quite easy for you, or were you thinking about certain things?
Yeah, I think decisions like that are always kind of hard. There's a lot to go into it. I was leaving a country I really enjoyed playing in and living in. I was leaving some of my best friends in the world. But ultimately, I needed to, at this point in my career, get my knee right, and get some minutes back under my belt once I do get my knee healthy. And to be able to do all of that surrounded by my family, it just kind of all worked out really well. This is the first time there's been a professional women's team of any sport in my hometown. So I think it's really unique, it's really special, and I think it's really purpose driven. Beyond just being able to play and get my knee right, I get to be a part of something new and special, and something that I never would have thought possible growing up. So yeah, there's a lot of things that weighed into it, but it all just kind of seemed to be the best situation for me at this point in my career, which could have been different a year ago before this injury, but now everything, physical health, mental health, emotional health, everything, just this seems like the right fit for me.
Yeah, and with the league as well, what sort of do you know about that at that point? For anybody who's sort of like listening to you saying about obviously Tampa Bay and the new club and the new league, what could you tell them about what you know so far, about how it's going to like work, like what's the exciting parts about it, like how does it work alongside other leagues in the US and things like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are confused, I would say, about what the league is and what it's going to look like, especially compared to the NWSL. I think, American sports, how it's set up as a business and how it constructed looks very different than the rest of the world. The rest of the world operates on a very more similar of systems, at least in the US. It's quite different. You've got trades, you've got drafts. There's no promotion and relegation. So in other sports, it's all the same as well in the US, or very similar. But across the world, it looks very different. So because there's no promotion relegation here, this is actually two professional leagues, at the same level in the US Soccer Federation. The NWSL is just a little bit older, right? It's been able to develop, and it has different backings than we do. We're set up a little bit different. We won't have those kind of drafts and trades. So there's a little bit more stability, which I think is really, really great, as female athletes. Having that stability and that trust within our club and our coaches and the league. We just feel that support, which I really, really like. But it's going to be just as professional as the NWSL. So it's not a promotion relegation system. We're not, a division below them or above them. It's just operated differently. We work on a different timeline, different schedules, but we are at the same level of professionalism. And as of, kind of like level quality, that remains to be seen. Obviously, our first game isn't for a while. We start on August 18th. So, it's something that we're just taking a chance on, and I think it's going to be really great. But again, it's hard to say. I have no idea what the other teams look like. There's only 8 of us at the minute. Next year, there's going to be already, I think, 13. I could be wrong. Might be 12, but a big jump already. So there's people really buying into the opportunity to give more to the game here professionally, which is really cool. So yeah, that was somewhat of a long-winded answer. It is a bit confusing, but hopefully it'll be really exciting. Just another platform and opportunity for the game to grow.
Also with women's football in general, like you've spoken at events before when you were with Arsenal about like the importance of like on International Women's Day of women in football. Obviously you've seen the growth of women's football. We talked about obviously you joining Arsenal after the Euros. how has that been for you as a player, like watching the growth of the game, and also like what two questions in one, what do you see the future of women's football looking like? Because it looks like it's only going to keep growing even further.
Yeah, it's been incredible. It was really cool to come to England, right when England won, on home soil. That was pretty incredible. I'm sure must have been similar in the Netherlands, before, but I think seeing that specifically was really cool. With football specifically in that time, it was really, really cool. And with Arsenal specifically, I think it's such a massive club. I think it was on the trajectory to grow like that. And I think you see now, especially in the States, with different sports, the WNBA is on a major rise as well. College basketball for the women's side too. It's getting a lot bigger. You're seeing a league professionally pull up in Canada next year, or in 2 years, I'm sorry. So there's huge growth going everywhere. Obviously, this league is a huge example of it. But you see now, like the Olympics, for the first time, there's 50% female athletes compared to 50% male athletes, and that's never been done before. So I think the rise of women's sports in general is huge. I think football is more at the forefront of that because it's a global game, and because people believe in it. People are investing. People want to see it grow, and they're getting behind it. So I think we've had a massive, massive growth in the last few years, and I really see it continue to go that way. I think we're gonna get some really big years of massive growth. My only hope is that we kind of get that all across the board. It can't just be one or two teams or one or two countries. We need it to be kind of like all encompassing, but I really think that it can happen. And I really think there's a lot of great people that are making it happen. It's not just happening by chance. It's happening with a purpose and with a passion from a lot of different people all around the world. Yeah, so that's been really cool to see at the forefront at Arsenal. Making a lot of history there, but especially here, making history in my hometown. I think that purpose is really what drove me here too, and it's really, really cool to be a part of.
So I want to touch on the growth as well. Obviously, with growth, it starts at the grassroots. It starts at the beginning when young girls and boys are very young. I want to know, obviously in England, I know a lot of players do work with the communities and stuff like that, but I did read up about how Tampa Bay are aiming to work with, younger communities to grow the game and stuff like that. I want to hear your opinion about that and how important that is for those younger players, especially in America now that you're there, and how important that is really.
Yeah, it's really cool. We've just started talking about that. Obviously, there's a lot of new things going on here. Everything is pretty new. But we've definitely already started talking about how can we get out there as a group? How can we inspire kids to chase their dreams, whatever that may look like, whether it's in football specifically or a different sport, or in academics, whatever drives them. But I think some of that remains to be seen, how exactly we can make that impact, but it's definitely at the forefront of our minds what we're trying to do. There's already been a lot of ideas thrown out there, and being from here, I still have contacts and connections for people that were at my youth club, or working in colleges around the area, or even like my high school coach that still coaches at my high school. So there's a lot of things in the works that I can't fully touch on, but hopefully we'll see a big drive in that. And like I said, I'm really big into my hometown, where I'm from. I love it. And also, working in the community and just jumping into how sport can inspire is really, really important to me. And it's definitely a big thing that I found in Arsenal and in all the work that they do. I just kind of got to jump in on that bandwagon because they were already massively into it. I just kind of got to follow some of the ropes, especially that, lots of women sat in front of me, or Leah Williamson. A lot of the girls did a lot of stuff, but I say those two in particular in their community, in their hometown, did a lot, and they both have inspired me to bring that here. So I'm excited to put that energy into what a lot of the staff have already done at the club before we've even showed up. So lots to come.
I'm excited to see that.
I mean, also looking at the growth of women's football and also younger people that we already talked about. grassroots club and also academies in general are playing a huge role in that, and also establishing new clubs. What would you say, looking at how ACL injuries should maybe also be prevented at a younger age, or at just smaller clubs, not just professional football?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's really tough. It's hard to say. Just because I've done my ACL does not mean I'm at all an expert in ACLs and what should be done for them. I think it's really confusing. I really do think people try their best and try their hardest. If we knew more information, if we had more information, we would be doing better. So I think a lot of that begins with research. And again, yeah, like you said, begins with research at the grassroots level, not just at the professional level. I think you can see a lot of differences in the women's and the men's game right now. And I think how the academies are set up and grassroots are set up, it just brings a lot of disparity all the way up to the professional level. So yeah, kind of trying to drive those standards at the professional level. So for what it might mean to prevent ACL injuries, or make the recoveries faster or better, or whatever the argument may be, we've got to do that at all levels. Unfortunately, I think that's part of the slow process of the game, of the growth. But it's definitely got to be a priority when we talk about that growth. So yeah, I don't know the specifics about what would be the right thing to do in instance of the ACL injury, or you see a lot of hamstring injuries as well. It's the most common. It's more common than ACL injuries. They're just a lot shorter of time usually, and dealt with a lot more. So I think a lot of injuries happen because we're not perfectly equipped or understanding how to grow at the right speed or the right level from the youth ages. But like I said, hopefully once we get a little bit more research, get a little bit knowledge about it, I believe that we've got people that really care and want to make the difference. We just don't have the right tools yet, or the right information to implement those tools.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you also, just with the whole research situation and everything, because as most of us probably know, most of the research done on ACLs or injuries in general is done on men, which I mean, in some cases is the same for women for sure, but there is also just reasons also in how our bodies are built and everything, why we are more likely to different injuries, or like special injuries also, like ACLs.
Yeah, and it's not just one factor. It's not just our, the width of our hips. It's not just our load. It's not just our pitches. It's not just our, menstrual cycle. It's not just our emotional health. It's a combination of everything. So hopefully once we understand how those factors work together and how they influence each other into those injuries and a bigger injury like an ACL, yeah, hopefully we'll have a better understanding. But I don't pretend to ignore how complicated it is. And there's a lot of really smart people out there working on it. I'm not one of them. I'm just hoping to, add to that information and add to that research, and hopefully, just make it better for generations to come.
Maybe adding on to that, do you have anything specific you want to say to especially young girls that might be scared what will happen to them mentally or physically when they actually have an ACL injury? How do you deal with that? Do you have any sort of advice you could give them if it happens?
Yeah, just dealing with any major injury. When I was younger, I tore my labrum in my shoulder, which is also like an 8-month injury. Not quite as long as an ACL, but it was still pretty massive. So I don't want to ignore all the other injuries out there. ACL is kind of the hot topic. Not to say that it shouldn't be, but yeah, I don't want to ignore anything else out there with any kind of major injury. Even a small one that's like 1 or 2 months might feel like a major one when you're younger. At any age, really, it's hard to stay away from playing the game that you love. But yeah, I think my advice is similar to what we've touched on. Lean into your support group, lean into that help. I mean, we don't do anything alone. We play, especially if you're a footballer, we play a team sport. I think for a reason. I could have been a swimmer growing up, which is still a team sport in a sense, but it's a lot lonelier, I think. Yeah, as humans, we're wired to be around people, or wired to be with people, and I think injuries can be isolating. So trying to put yourself around good people, and be good people yourself, because there's other people's going through injuries as well. So I guess that would be my biggest advice, um, regarding injury or kind of not, is try to find good people out there, because there's a lot of them out in the world. So if you're good to them, they'll be good to you.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of touch on sort of one last thing, because obviously I realise we've been asking lots of different questions, but kind of going back to the idea of women's football, the growth in general. Obviously, we know women's football is so important to so many different people, and there's loads of different reasons for that, and that's why it's grown, is because it's so different, so unique, and just incredible sport. But what do you think it is about women's football that makes it so special for you as a player, maybe for the fans in general? Just what is it about women's football that is so unique and is so special?
That's a great question. I really think sport is special because of how it builds character and how it brings people together, cultures together. Football specifically does that as a global game, despite what language you speak, where you grew up, where you're from, yeah, what kind of family life or personal life you have, the game is the same everywhere. Yeah, so it's kind of a global language in that way. So for me, it's been really, really eye-opening, and a really incredible growth experience to meet new people, experience new cultures, being able to live in different countries and seeing how the game is different in all those places. But I think in women's football specifically, it's very inclusive, it's accessible. At least we want it to be, and we try to make it that way. Everyone's allowed to come, everyone's invited, everyone's welcome. We hope everyone can find it to be a safe space, an inspiring space, a really beautiful space. There's a lot of incredible people that try to make it so. And I think that is why it's so appealing and it's so exciting, is because it's a world where people care a lot, care about each other, and yeah, care about beautiful things. And so I think there's a lot of gratitude involved as well. We're all very grateful to see it grow, to see incredible people, to see incredible football. The game's gotten so much better as well, as we're saying about, more fans and more sponsorships and more viewership and all of that. But the game's grown with it. Like, players have stepped up, which is really, really cool to see. We've got some incredible talent. But again, those talented players are also very good people, that care about the game and care about, the fans and the culture around it. So for me, that's why it's special. And I think that's why it'll continue to be special.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we couldn't agree more. Like, this is sort of why we set up what we're doing with Beyond the Pitch as a media outlet, with the growth of the women's game and the way that it's supposed to be, and the inclusivity and accessibility. The media has to represent that as well, and the stories that people have to share have to be done in the right way. And at the end of the day, we're all just people with that same interest in women's football. And you mentioned it earlier, and it like stuck with me about, as players, you want to engage with the fans, you want to be able to do that. And it still feels like women's football has that, in a way. Like, even if it's not as much as it used to be, you've still got that sense of the fans feel connected with players and teams, and they don't feel like they're distant or not able to access that in any way. So yeah, I think that's what is so incredible as well with women's football and what we're trying to do. And obviously with players, like, you can tell the players also have that view, and that's really nice to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, it's not as accessible as it used to be, I think, but it still is. I think as a women's team, women's players are more accessible in terms of, seeing their personalities, seeing them as people and not just seeing them as players, which sometimes can get a little bit too invasive. Just as, as women's footballers, like, you have a personal life, you have a private life. But I think a lot of women's footballers are open to showing themselves authentically and putting themselves out there. And I think that's really cool to see. You're not just a player on the pitch. There's a person, and you have a story, and you have a life, and you have a dog and a family and a sister, whoever it might be that wants to share those certain things. And I think that is appealing as well. As a fan of the game myself, I think that's really cool. You get to connect with people more as people and then root for them as players.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I just want to say like thank you so much for doing this, and it's so nice to speak to you and hear about your journey and obviously your career, and we just wish you the best of luck with what you're doing. I know it's about, did you say it's about just less than a month's time till you start your season, so I'm sure you'll be getting prepared and hopefully, you know, with your recovery as well. We wish you the best with that, and yeah, we can't wait to see what you do next with your career and going forward. So thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. It's really an honor that you decided to spend your Friday evening with me. It's really cool to see you guys, yeah, doing your best, putting yourself out there as young female journalists. So it's really cool. I appreciate you guys showing interest in me and my story, and hopefully we continue to help the game grow and yeah, keep it a really positive place.